There's one engine that sparks more arguments than it starts trucks. To some, the Ford 6-liter Power Stroke is an underrated powerhouse that just needs a few upgrades. To others, it's the best example of an overpromised, underbuilt engineering disaster. Either way, it's earned a reputation: loud, controversial, and soaked in coolant. So what really went wrong with the 6.0? Was it doomed from day one? Or did Ford's demand for more power turn a decent engine into a mechanical mess? Before the 6-liter Power Stroke became one of the most infamous diesel engines in modern truck history, there was the 7.3-liter Power Stroke, a beloved, well-built workhorse that earned a reputation for reliability and simplicity. So why on earth would Ford toss it out in favor of something entirely new? The answer lies in a perfect storm of government regulation and market pressure. In the early 2000s, emission standards were tightening dramatically. Starting in 2004, the EPA cracked down on diesel emissions, mandating cleaner-burning engines with advanced emission systems. The 7.3-liter Power Stroke, tough as it was, had no emissions components at all. It simply wasn't designed to accommodate the kind of exhaust gas recirculation systems, EGR, required to meet those new standards. And retrofitting it wasn't a viable solution without compromising performance and reliability. Rather than risk trying to modernize a platform that was never intended to be emissions-friendly, Ford teamed up with Navistar to develop a new engine from the ground up. That engine was the VT365, which Ford adapted and rebranded as the 6-liter Power Stroke for its Super Duty lineup. The goal: more power, lower emissions, and a modern diesel power plant that could go head-to-head with offerings from Dodge and GM. It sounded like a solid plan on paper. When the 6-liter Power Stroke debuted in 2003, it actually made a strong first impression. It was more advanced than its predecessor, featuring a 4-valve cylinder head, a variable geometry turbocharger, VGT, and a high-pressure version of the HUEI injection system. It also boasted a crankcase bed plate for improved bottom-end strength, all while cranking out 325 horsepower and up to 570 pound-feet of torque, a significant bump over the 7.3-liter. The media even praised it. In fact, Wards listed the 6-liter Power Stroke among its 10 best engines of 2003. But as history would soon show, that award didn't mean much. As these engines hit the road and started racking up miles, their weaknesses became painfully obvious. What was once praised as an innovative leap forward soon turned into a long list of engineering missteps that left many owners frustrated, broke, and stranded. What was once praised as an innovative leap forward soon turned into a long list of engineering missteps that left many owners frustrated, broke, and stranded. Some of the same features that made the 6-liter look impressive on paper, like the VGT turbo, the complex EGR system, and high-pressure oil injection, turned out to be sources of constant headaches. Ford may have achieved its goal of meeting emission standards and boosting performance, but it came at a steep cost to reliability. Owners weren't just dealing with occasional quirks. They were replacing major components, sometimes multiple times, within a few years of ownership. In short, the 6-liter Power Stroke was a ticking time bomb hiding behind a shiny spec sheet. And as we'll see next, that bomb started going off in the form of catastrophic failures tied to emissions equipment, oil systems, and flawed engineering choices. If there's one component that symbolizes the downfall of the 6-liter Power Stroke, it's the EGR system. While it was added to meet emissions regulations, it ended up creating a cascade of issues that would haunt Ford owners for years. At the heart of it all is the EGR cooler, a device meant to reduce combustion temperatures by cooling and recirculating exhaust gases back into the intake. That sounds simple enough, but the 6-liter's EGR cooler is anything but reliable. Over time, the cooler becomes a hotbed for failure. Cracks develop from repeated heating and cooling cycles, especially on trucks that idle frequently. Even worse, as the EGR cooler begins to plug up with carbon soot, it stops doing its job effectively. That's bad news on its own, but the real kicker is how eerily similar the symptoms of a failing EGR cooler are to a blown head gasket. We're talking white smoke, coolant loss, and overheating. Many shops misdiagnosed these failures for years, replacing head gaskets when the actual culprit was was the EGR cooler all along. And it doesn't stop there. The EGR valve, which is supposed to control the flow of exhaust gases into the intake, is another weak link. It's prone to getting jammed with carbon buildup, causing it to stick open or shut. Either scenario results in poor performance and a check engine light. Ford later tried to address this issue in the 6.4-liter Power Stroke by beefing up the electric motor that actuated the valve, but for the 6-liter, the damage was already done. As if the EGR system weren't problematic enough on its own, much of its failure could be traced back to another notorious weak point in the 6-liter Power Stroke, the oil cooler. This component sits at the center of a complex, fragile web of systems, and when it starts to fail, it kicks off a chain reaction of mechanical carnage. The oil cooler's job is to transfer heat from the engine's oil to the coolant. But thanks to poor internal design and susceptibility to contamination from sand, sludge, and oil coolant, it tends to clog. And when that happens, things spiral fast. One of the first victims is the EGR cooler, which relies on the oil cooler for coolant flow. Once the oil cooler's plugged in, the EGR cooler gets starved of coolant, overheats, and cracks, dumping coolant into the exhaust and mimicking a blown head gasket. But the damage doesn't stop there. A compromised oil cooler can also lead to overheating of the engine oil, which is a death sentence for components like the turbo, injectors, bearings, and the high-pressure oil pump. The scariest part? These issues often show no symptoms until it's far too late. Without an aftermarket monitor to keep tabs on oil temperatures, most drivers don't even know there's a problem brewing. Worse still, oil cooler failure can cause oil and coolant to mix if the housing cracks, leading to even more catastrophic damage. The best preventative measure is to install a coolant filter system, which traps contaminants before they can clog the oil cooler. But even that doesn't solve the root of the problem. It just buys time. At the core of the 6-liter Power Stroke operation is a high-pressure oil system that's absolutely essential for the engine to run. Unlike conventional diesels that rely solely on fuel pressure, the 6-liter uses pressurized engine oil to fire its injectors, a system known as hydraulically actuated electronically controlled unit injectors, HEUI. It's clever in theory, but in practice, it's an engineering minefield. Here's how it works. A low-pressure oil pump moves oil through the engine, eventually feeding a reservoir located in the lifter valley. From there, a rear-mounted high-pressure oil pump draws oil and pressurizes it up to 3,000 psi or more. This oil pressure then activates the injectors. The entire system is incredibly sensitive. If the high-pressure oil pump doesn't deliver enough pressure, at least 500 psi, the engine simply won't start. The trouble begins with how fragile and failure-prone that pump and its supporting hardware are. For starters, there's an inlet screen between the reservoir and the HPOP that's made of weak mesh. It tears easily, allowing debris to get sucked into the pump, grinding it to death from the inside out. On top of that, a component called the injection pressure regulator, IPR, can get clogged with metal shavings or sludge, which also sabotages the system's ability to build pressure. And then there are the O-rings. The 6-liter's oil system is full of them, especially around the standpipes and dummy plugs that supply the oil rails. If just one O-ring fails, it can cause an internal leak that bleeds off pressure, and suddenly your truck won't run or start. The worst part? There's no immediate warning. Your engine might start and run perfectly one day and crank endlessly the next. To make matters worse, while the high-pressure system gets all the attention, the low-pressure oil pump isn't innocent either. It has a tendency to walk outwards and chew into the front cover, causing further oil starvation. What you end up with is a system where one small part failing can cascade into total engine shutdown. Behind every design flaw, there's usually a boardroom brawl, and the 6-liter Power Stroke was no exception. What began as a high-profile partnership between Ford and Navistar, the parent company of International, who built the engines, soon turned into a corporate divorce that played out in lawsuits, finger-pointing, and one of the messiest OEM battles in modern automotive history. Ford blamed Navistar for delivering a defective engine filled with quality control issues and poor design choices. Navistar Navistar countered that Ford's cooling system design, ECM tuning, and last-minute hardware changes were the real problem, and that Ford pushed the engine to market before it was ready. According to insiders, Ford was under pressure to keep up with GM's Duramax and Dodge's Cummins, and in doing so, rushed Navistar to finalize a platform that hadn't been field-tested properly. By 2007, tensions exploded. Ford sued Navistar for breach of contract, warranty reimbursement costs, and damage to the company's reputation. Navistar didn't back down. They countersued, even threatening to cut off engine shipments entirely at one point. Eventually, the two giants reached a confidential settlement, but the damage had been done. Ford decided to go solo, cutting ties with Navistar and developing its own in-house diesel, the 6.7-liter Power Stroke, which launched in 2011. But while the legal teams battled it out, thousands of 6-liter owners were left holding a bag. Warranty claims were through the roof. Class action lawsuits began to stack up, and customer faith in Ford's Super Duty trucks took a serious hit. Many fleets abandoned Ford altogether, switching to Dodge or GM just to avoid the headache. The 6-liter was a cautionary tale that would be told for years, and is still being told. Don't stop following us. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more of our videos. See you in the next one.